I never planned to stand up at my sister's engagement dinner and ruin everything. That's not who I am, or at least not who I thought I was. But when my mother asked me to say a few words about Kayla and her fiancé, something inside me just broke. I'm Olivia, and 6 months ago, I destroyed my family's picture-perfect facade in under 5 minutes. One toast. That's all it took to unravel 28 years of secrets, lies, and the carefully constructed image of the successful Chen Williams family of Westchester County. The ironic part? I was the family peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over, who never made waves. Until that night when I couldn't pretend anymore, when I realized that the price of keeping everyone else comfortable was my own dignity. If you've ever swallowed your truth to keep the peace, or wondered what would happen if you finally spoke up, well, this is what happened when I did. And trust me, it's not the story you're expecting. If you're new here, consider subscribing to hear more stories about family dynamics and finding your voice. And if you're wondering if standing up for myself was worth losing everything I thought mattered, keep watching. Growing up in the Chen Williams household meant understanding your role early. My father, James Williams, built his real estate empire from nothing, while my mother, Maylin Chen, came from old money and connections that stretched from Manhattan to Shanghai. Together, they were the power couple of our affluent New York suburb, charming at fundraisers, ruthless in business, and obsessed with appearances at home. Then there was my older sister Kayla, beautiful, confident, and my mother's clear favorite. I was the quieter daughter, the responsible one who got straight A's but never quite the spotlight. Every Thanksgiving, my mother would parade us in front of relatives and family friends at our annual dinner party. When I was 12, I spent weeks practicing the piano for this event. I memorized Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, playing until my fingers cramped. But the night of the performance, just as the guests settled in our living room with its cathedral ceilings and imported Italian furniture, my mother stopped me before I could start. "Kayla has prepared a violin piece instead," she announced, her hand firmly on my shoulder. "Olivia's piece isn't quite ready." I hadn't made a single mistake during practice, but it didn't matter. Kayla's mediocre performance received a standing ovation while I served dessert. The pattern continued through high school. During my valedictorian speech, my mother spent the entire time showing wedding photos of Kayla and her college boyfriend on her phone to the parents seated nearby. The relationship ended 3 months later, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I learned to expect less, to shrink myself, to accept that my achievements would always be secondary. Despite everything, I still craved my mother's approval. So when I graduated from Columbia Law with honors and landed a position at Morrison & Foerster, I thought things might change. They didn't. At family gatherings, conversations about my cases were quickly redirected to Kayla's dating life or my mother's charity work. My father occasionally threw me proud glances, but never defended me against my mother's subtle dismissals. The grand gesture came last Christmas. After years of saving, I bought my mother a jade pendant that matched her prized collection, an extravagant peace offering that cost 3 months' salary. She wore it once, for exactly 30 minutes, before carefully placing it in her jewelry box, where it has remained untouched. That night, she spent dinner gushing about the paper lanterns Kayla had brought back from a weekend trip to San Francisco's Chinatown. What none of them knew, the secret I had carried for years, was that I had discovered something during my second year of law school. While organizing my father's study during winter break, I found documents revealing that my mother had systematically sabotaged several of my opportunities over the years. Recommendation letters mysteriously lost, A summer internship at a prestigious firm suddenly no longer available after my mother had lunch with the partner's wife. A study abroad program in Beijing that fell through due to administrative issues that I later learned were created by my mother's interference. When confronted privately, she had smiled that practiced smile and said, "Olivia, darling, you've always been so sensitive. I was protecting you from disappointment. You're not like Kayla. You need a more structured path." Then she patted my cheek and walked away, leaving me with the understanding that my own mother had been actively clipping my wings while pretending to cushion my falls. I buried this knowledge deep, convinced myself that confronting it would destroy our family. Instead, I worked twice as hard, built my career despite her interference, and played my role as the dutiful daughter. Until Kayla's engagement dinner changed everything. The invitation to Kayla's engagement dinner arrived in my mailbox on embossed cardstock with gold foil lettering, my mother's signature touch. Kayla was marrying Bradley Thompson, the son of a state senator and heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. It was the merger of dynasties my mother had always dreamed about, and the event was to be held at the Pier Hotel in Manhattan, with a guest list that read like a who's who of New York society. I bought a new dress for the occasion, midnight blue with a modest neckline, expensive enough to meet my mother's standards, but not flashy enough to compete with Kayla. My boyfriend, Marcus, offered to come with me, but I declined. Marcus, a public defender from Queens with a booming laugh and no patience for pretense, had never been deemed suitable for family functions. My mother had made that clear the one time I'd brought him to Sunday dinner, speaking over him and later asking if I was going through a phase. The evening began with cocktails in the hotel's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected off mirrored walls as waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. My father gave me a quick side hug before being pulled away by business associates. Kayla floated through the room in designer white, her 3-carat diamond catching the light with each practiced gesture. My mother, resplendent in traditional Chinese silk, orchestrated the entire affair from the center of the room, her eyes constantly scanning for imperfections. "Olivia, darling, there you are," she said when I approached, air kissing my cheek. "I was beginning to worry you'd be late. Again." The subtle dig referenced a family dinner I'd missed 3 months ago when a case had kept me at the office until midnight. "Wouldn't miss it, Mom," I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "That dress is sensible," she said, her gaze flickering over me. "Now come meet the Thompsons properly. And please, try to mention your work at the firm, not those pro bono cases you're always going on about." Throughout the appetizer course, tuna tartare with avocado mousse, I maintained the expected small talk with Bradley's cousins seated nearby. One of them, a hedge fund manager named Trevor, kept touching my arm as he explained cryptocurrency to me, assuming I couldn't possibly understand it despite my financial law background. "Your sister is absolutely stunning," he said, redirecting the conversation for the 3rd time. "And I hear she's being considered for a segment on Good Morning America." Something about her interior design blog? "Kayla has always had a great eye for aesthetics," I replied automatically, the practiced response coming easily after years of deflecting attention back to my sister. During the main course, sous vide lamb with truffle risotto, my mother clinked her glass for attention. "Before dessert, I'd love for a few family members to say a few words." She turned to my father, who gave a brief, warm toast about welcoming Bradley to the family. Then my aunt spoke, telling childhood stories about Kayla that somehow omitted any mention of my existence, despite us growing up in the same house. And then my mother's eyes found me. "Olivia, darling, as Kayla's only sister, I'm sure you have something special to share." The room quieted. 60 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My champagne glass was suddenly empty, though I had barely sipped from it. Behind my mother, I could see Kayla's face. Not excited or encouraging, but wary. She knew our dynamics better than anyone. As I stood, my phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Marcus. Remember who you are, not who they want you to be. It was in that moment, looking at my sister's cautious expression, my mother's expectant smile, and those 2 lines of text, that something shifted inside me. The weight of years of diminishment, of carefully crafted politeness, of swallowing my truth, it all rose to the surface. But what truly broke the dam was what happened next. As I opened my mouth to begin my rehearsed, pleasant toast, my mother leaned over to Mrs. Thompson and whispered just loudly enough for me to hear, "Olivia's always been the awkward one. We're grateful she at least has her career, since family life has eluded her." The crystal glass in my hand suddenly felt like the only solid thing in the room. I watched a drop of condensation slide down its stem as a strange calm washed over me. 28 years of being the good daughter, the invisible sister, the convenient scapegoat. And for what? So my mother could continue to craft her perfect narrative at my expense? I looked up at the gathered crowd, at their expectant faces, at the photographer poised to capture this candid family moment for posterity, and I made a decision that would change everything. "I'd like to propose a toast," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "to truth, and to the stories we tell ourselves about family." "I'd like to propose a toast," I repeated, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "to my sister Kayla, who has always been the sun our family orbits around." I raised my glass and took a deliberate sip, feeling the cool champagne contrast with the heat rising in my cheeks. "And to my mother, who has worked tirelessly to ensure it stayed that way." My mother's smile froze on her face, her eyes narrowing slightly, a warning sign I'd been conditioned to heed my entire life. But something had broken loose inside me, something that couldn't be contained any longer. "You know, Bradley," I continued, turning to my soon-to-be brother-in-law, "there's a family tradition you should be aware of. In the Chen Williams household, we have a very specific hierarchy. Kayla shines, I support, and my mother, well, my mother ensures that balance is never disrupted." The room had gone so quiet you could hear the ice settling in water glasses. My father half rose from his chair, confusion etched across his face. When I was accepted to the Beijing summer law program in college, a program that mysteriously fell through, it wasn't because of administrative issues. I locked eyes with my mother. "It was because Mom called the program director and withdrew my application, claiming I had health concerns. The same way she lost my recommendation letter for the judicial internship I worked toward for 2 years. The same way she told Marcus he wasn't welcome at family functions because he didn't have the right pedigree." Gasps rippled through the room. My mother stood up abruptly, her silk dress rustling. "Olivia, you're clearly overwrought. Perhaps you—" "I'm not finished," I said, surprised by the authority in my voice. "For 28 years, I've played my part. I've been the good daughter, the supportive sister, the family member who makes everyone else comfortable at the expense of her own truth. I've watched you systematically undermine my achievements while celebrating Kayla's every move." I turned to Kayla, whose face had drained of color. "And this isn't about you, Kayla. Congratulations on your engagement. I hope Bradley makes you happy. But I can't stand here and pretend anymore." From my purse, I withdrew a folded document, a copy of the letter my mother had sent to the Beijing program director. I'd kept it all these years, a reminder of what I was up against. I found this in Dad's study years ago, along with other evidence of Mom's interference in my life. I've been carrying it around like a talisman, telling myself that confronting it would hurt the family. But I realize now that in this family, my hurt has never counted. I placed the letter on the table. I won't be the family scapegoat anymore. I won't smile and nod while you diminish me, and I certainly won't toast to a family dynamic built on favoritism and manipulation. The room erupted in murmurs. Bradley's mother clutched her pearls, literally, an action I would have found comical under different circumstances. My father stood fully now, his face ashen as he reached for the letter. My mother's voice cut through the chaos, her tone icier than I'd ever heard it. Olivia Elizabeth Chen Williams, you will sit down this instant. You are making a spectacle of yourself and ruining your sister's special night. I felt a surprising smile spread across my face. That's just it, Mom. It's always about the spectacle with you, isn't it? The perfect family, the perfect daughters, the perfect narrative. Well, I'm rewriting my part. I placed my napkin carefully on the table, straightened my shoulders, and looked around the room one last time. I wish you all a lovely evening. Bradley, welcome to the family. Just know what you're really marrying into. As I walked toward the exit, legs trembling but steps steady, I heard my mother's voice behind me, no longer controlled, but cracking with rage. If you walk out that door, Olivia, don't expect to be welcomed back. I paused at the threshold, turned one last time, and said the words that had been building inside me for decades. Mom, I stopped expecting welcome from you a long time ago. And then I was through the door, down the hotel's marble corridor, and out into the New York night, where I finally took my first full breath in years. The aftermath was as explosive as you might expect. My phone blew up with texts and calls the minute I hit the sidewalk outside the pier. First from my father, then a barrage from distant relatives and family friends who had witnessed the confrontation. Kayla called 17 times that night, her messages evolving from furious to confused to, surprisingly, concerned. I turned my phone off and took a cab straight to Marcus's apartment in Astoria, where I collapsed on his couch and finally let myself cry, not from regret, but from release. I've burned every bridge, I told him between sobs. 28 years of family ties, up in flames in 5 minutes. Marcus sat beside me, his hand steady on my back. Some bridges need burning, Liv. Some paths need to be cleared to make way for new ones. The professional fallout came swiftly. By Monday morning, 3 of my mother's friends had pulled their business from our firm. My boss called me into his office, his expression grave, but not unkind. Your mother is on several boards that direct significant business our way, he explained. I'm not firing you, Olivia, but I want you to know the position you've put us in. I nodded, understanding the subtext. My days at Morrison & Forster were numbered. But strangely, instead of panic, I felt a flicker of possibility. For the first time, I could imagine a career path not chosen to please my mother or match her expectations. 3 days after the dinner, my father showed up at my office. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, the confident real estate mogul replaced by a tired man in his 60s with shadows under his eyes. Your mother is, he began, then stopped, searching for words. She's not well, Olivia. What you said, the letters, the interference, I had no idea. I believed him. My father had always been somewhat removed from the emotional dynamics of our family, content to make money and leave the women's business of raising daughters to my mother. It was its own kind of neglect, but not malicious like my mother's manipulations. I found more documents, he continued, sliding a manila envelope across my desk. After you left, I went through her study. There's a lot you don't know. Inside were medical records dating back to before I was born. My mother had suffered 3 miscarriages between Kayla's birth and mine. The last one had been a son, the male heir my traditional Chinese grandparents had desperately wanted. Then came diagnoses of depression, anxiety, prescriptions for medication she'd apparently never taken, and therapy sessions she'd abandoned. Among these was a letter from a psychiatrist suggesting that my mother's fixation on Kayla and her complicated feelings toward her second daughter needed addressing. "She was sick, Liv," my father said softly. "Is sick. It doesn't excuse what she did to you, but it explains some things," I finished for him. The revelation didn't erase decades of hurt, but it shifted something in my understanding. My mother's behavior hadn't been about me at all. It had been about her own unresolved grief and mental illness, calcified over decades into rigid family roles. The week after that, Kayla showed up at my apartment unannounced, a bottle of tequila in hand. "I didn't know," she said simply when I opened the door. "About any of it, I swear, Liv." We talked until sunrise, peeling back layers of our childhood, comparing notes on the different mothers we'd each experienced. "She put so much pressure on me to be perfect," Kayla admitted. "I always envied your freedom to pursue your own path." I nearly choked on my drink. Freedom? Are you kidding? My entire life was about trying to earn a fraction of the attention she gave you. "And my entire life was about never disappointing her," Kayla countered. "Do you think I wanted to be an interior designer? I was pre-med before Mom convinced me it would be too stressful for my artistic temperament." By morning, we'd reached a fragile new understanding. The grand gesture, my jade pendant, came up when Kayla mentioned seeing it in our mother's jewelry box. "She keeps it on her bedside table now," she said quietly. "Since that night, she holds it sometimes when she thinks no one's watching." As for the engagement, Kayla and Bradley postponed the wedding indefinitely. "I need to figure out who I am outside of Mom's expectations," she explained. "And honestly, so does Bradley." That night was illuminating for him too. Over the following months, I resigned from the firm and, with Marcus's encouragement, opened a small practice focusing on immigration law, work that had always called to me, but that my mother had dismissed as charity cases. I found clients who needed me, work that fulfilled me, and slowly built a reputation based on my own merit rather than family connections. My relationship with my parents entered a complex new phase. My father and I began meeting for coffee every other week, tentatively rebuilding a relationship that had always existed in my mother's shadow. As for my mother, after 3 months of silence, she sent a single text. "The jade matches your eyes, not mine. It was always meant for you." It wasn't an apology. I'm not sure my mother is capable of those, but it was an acknowledgement. We've seen each other twice since then, brief, awkward meetings in neutral locations. She's started therapy again, according to my father. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship I once craved, but we're finding a new way forward, one stripped of pretense and performance. The unexpected twist in all this? 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from Bradley's mother, of all people. "Your courage that night made me examine my own family dynamics," she wrote. "I've since had long overdue conversations with my own daughters. Thank you for the disruption we didn't know we needed." Sometimes the most meaningful changes come from our most painful moments. My mother's dismissal, "If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back," had been my greatest fear for so long. But walking through that door anyway led me to a life more authentic and relationships more honest than I could have imagined. Looking back now, standing up at that engagement dinner was both the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done. Hardest Because it meant letting go of the family narrative I'd clung to for nearly 3 decades. Easiest because in that moment, the truth simply couldn't stay buried any longer. I won't pretend everything's perfect now. Healing from lifelong family dynamics isn't a straight line. There are still difficult days, uncomfortable conversations, and moments when old patterns try to reassert themselves. But I'm no longer shrinking myself to make room for someone else's story about who I should be. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to speak your truth, even when it disrupts the comfortable fiction everyone's agreed to live in. Real relationships can only be built on honesty, however messy that might be. If something in my story resonates with you, I hope it gives you courage to examine your own family dynamics and speak your truth when necessary. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding your authentic voice and share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful words you can say are simply, "This is who I am, and this is what really happened."